Hello everyone, welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is Hannah if you're new here, and we're talking about all the books I read in October. Now, I'm filming this slightly early before the end of the month, so I have a couple of books I'm in the middle of that I'll probably finish before the official end of October, which I'll talk about very briefly at the end. But I did complete 6 books that I'm going to be discussing with you. I have a couple secret books that I'm keeping tucked away for now, but these are the 6 books I have completed as of filming this video in the month of October. The first book we're going to be talking about is Her Night with the Duke by Diane Quincy. Now, this is an historical romance featuring a woman of color. Diana Quincy is a Palestinian American author who I was very happy to support. This is about Delilah and Elliot, and this is kind of a premise in which the two of them have an initial steamy encounter where they don't know who the other person is. It's just like a one-night stand, and then through a series of events they end up being in each other's lives in a much more significant way. And in this instance, Delilah's stepdaughter is potentially going to be engaged to be married to Elliot, so it's very juicy in terms of drama. Personally, I don't mind having an intimate scene up front and then feelings develop later between the main pairing. However, I felt like they went from having that steamy scene, and it was very emotionally intimate as well, to Delilah hating Elliot. And for me, the pacing kind of slowed down in terms of romantic development. It just kind of killed the romantic vibe for me because she is really overprotective of her stepdaughter and doesn't think he's good enough for her, but she's also jealous. So I just don't think they bounced back from that very well in terms of the execution. To me, this is more about Delilah finding herself and her independence as a widower, and finding herself more so than finding a romantic partner. But overall, I still enjoyed this, and I think I gave it like slightly less than 4 stars. I'm being pedantic and giving out like 0.25 stars now, I guess. So I gave this like 3.75, but I rounded it up to a 4-star on Goodreads. Like a solid book, but not my favorite romance ever. Speaking of romance, I'm really sad about this one. I read Make the Season Bright by Ashley Herring Blake, and I pre-ordered this book. I love Ashley Herring Blake's Bright Falls series. It's a trilogy of romances in this small town, and they're all sapphic, and I was so excited for Ashley Herring Blake's next sapphic romance, and this was a holiday romance, and I did not like this. But not for the reasons most people don't like this. This is about a woman named Charlotte who is kind of a very standoffish, bisexual professional violin player slash professor, and Brighton, who is her childhood friend turned lover turned ex, getting back together. And Brighton is kind of an indie musician living in Tennessee, in Nashville, and Charlotte currently lives in New York City. Most people don't like this because they hate Charlotte, because Charlotte is very standoffish, very cold. She doesn't open up very much. She tends to isolate herself and hide from her problems and just like shut down, and can be cruel in her shutting down. And Brighton is the bubbly, like, let's talk about our feelings, let's kind of be in your face about it, sunshine type of character. But I didn't like Brighton. Most people don't like Charlotte. I really connected to Charlotte for reasons. Partially because I just felt her character was more interesting, to be honest, and more dynamic than Brighton's character. And I was so angry at Brighton in this book that I know Charlotte forgives Brighton for literally leaving her at the altar in their previous relationship, but I can't forgive Brighton. It's kind of explained away in this book as, you know, she was young and didn't know how to express her feelings, and I'm like, that's not good enough, at least for me. So that's why I have a hard time with second chance romances, because of this reason. Because I, maybe better for worse, I have a hard time sometimes forgiving the partner, typically who causes the initial breakup in the past storyline. It can be done well, but more often than not, it's a miss from me. I think that's the primary reason that I didn't like this. I was just so angry at Brighton, and then her being so pushy and trying and kind of forcing Charlotte to confront her feelings, I think just angered me more, because I do think she was a little too pushy with Charlotte, and there are times when you do need to cool off and like step away for a minute, and there are times when you should confront your feelings and actually have an honest conversation. And I didn't think that the balance was there, and I don't think Brighton respected Charlotte and her way of processing emotion at all. I didn't want them to get together, so I didn't like this book. The romance vibe, or the Christmas vibes were there, but the romance was not for me. Then I read I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Hartman, and this is a translated work of fiction from French. The author is, I think, Belgian, and translated into English. And so this was originally written in the 90s, and I think it was more recently translated into English, and then there was an audiobook created for this. And I listened to the audiobook of this. This is a short, the audiobook was 6 hours, so I don't know what that translates to, but that's a pretty short novella, I'd say. And this is about an unnamed narrator who is a teenager at the start of this story, and she is in a bunker prison with 39 other women, and they don't know why they're imprisoned, and they've been there since our narrator was a small child, and she doesn't have any memories from outside of the bunker prison. And so the other women have no idea why they were taken, and they kind of talk about their past life and what it was like before the bunker, and just trying to maybe make sense of life and possibly why this is happening to them. And eventually they escape from this scenario, and it's kind of a little bit of a survival story, but this is more of like a literary sci-fi, or a literary sci-fi dystopian is how I categorize this one, because it's really about the musings of humanity, what it is to be human, what it is to be a woman, when there are no men in comparison, especially our young narrator who has never known a man in her life. And so what does that mean? She also never has a period. So does that make her not a woman? And so it's really musing on femininity, womanhood, humanhood, what it means to be a human being. This is also incredibly sad and devastating, because you don't get answers by the end. You don't figure out why any of this has happened to these characters, which some people may like or may not, but it is incredibly stark and bleak in its writing, and incredibly sad as the events of this little story unfold. And I can't really explain why I gave it 5 stars, but I did. It's just sad and oblique and pondering and slow, and I loved it. And it got me. I got it. This is one of those books where it's like, if you get it, you get it, and if you don't, it's understandable why you didn't. But I'm thankfully one of the people, I think, that got it, and I love this. I think my ultimate rating was like a 4.5 out of 5 stars, because I do like answers. My preference is to have some conclusion and some sort of answer, even if it's vague, and there was none of that in this book. But other than that, like, truly, it ended how it needed to end. This was a great story, and I think it's kind of like a modern classic, honestly. Like, I feel like this is one where you would read it in school, maybe not in like a high school reading class, but like in a college level, like women's studies maybe thing. Like, I really think this one would benefit from like a group assignment or like a book club, because I feel like I want to talk about this one with other people and get their thoughts and opinions on it. Now, I'll be completely honest with you when I'm talking about the Paper Menagerie and Other Stories by Ken Liu. Ken Liu wrote The Dandelion Dynasty, and I am obsessed with that series. I loved it, and so I wanted to read his Hugo winning short story collection, and I read 60% of this, and I'm marking it as read. Let me explain. Typically, I DNF books at the 80-90% mark and don't mark them as read on my Goodreads. This one, I feel okay with actually saying, no, I read the majority of this book. I'm going to mark it as complete. And just because I feel like it. I feel like I put the effort in with this short story collection, and I wasn't vibing at the end, which is why I put it down. So take that how you will. Judge me one way or the other if you don't, but I don't typically do this. And so overall, I'm giving the collection a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I really, really liked, I honestly loved some of these stories. And then some of these stories I was like, meh, was that a story or was that just like musings? And the reason I stopped is because the last 40 to 50% of this book are 3 stories. And the first 50 to 60% is 12 stories. So there's 15 stories in this collection. And the last 3 stories are super long. They're almost like novellas. And by that point, I was just burnt out reading short stories and novellas. To be honest, I was like, I need to be done. So I will highlight some of my favorites in this collection. There is a story called State Change about a woman named Rena, and her soul is manifested outside of her body as an ice cube. So she has to keep her ice cube like frozen all the time. And so she doesn't really have a life because she's always protecting her soul. That one was really good. There was one called The Regular, which was a mystery, sci-fi mystery. Loved it. That one was a 5-star read. The Paper Menagerie, which is the title story, short story, made me cry. Also 5 stars. And there were other ones I gave 4 stars, but those were my 3 favorites. State Change, The Regular, and The Paper Menagerie. The other ones I gave between, 2 stars and 4 stars. So that's how I got my average rating in there. So take that with how you will. I just got tired of reading short stories by the end. And now we have a book that I don't really know how to talk about because it's one of those that was like, it was fine, it was pretty good, but I'm not going to think about it, and I don't think I'm going to continue on with the series. Like, there wasn't definitively anything wrong with this book, and I'm talking about The Queen of Blood by Sarah Beth Durst. Is that correct? Is that her name? Yeah. Sarah Beth Durst. And I read, this is my 3rd book by the author, and she writes kind of not low stakes, but it reads like YA in that everything's going to be okay in the end. You might have a little bit of trials and tribulations, but you're not so emotionally invested and emotionally attached to the characters that you're not satisfied with the conclusion, even if like something happens to them, if that makes sense. Like, it's not a bad thing, but they're usually more like plot driven than I enjoy. I usually tend to enjoy more character focused stories, and The Queen of Blood is about this kingdom that is ruled by a queen, and her role is to control the 6 types of spirits that are hell-bent on destroying any human life and like eradicating them. And so it's her job to keep the spirits in check. And something is fishy with that. Like there are villages that are kind of being consumed by spirits, these deadly spirits, and we're like wondering if the queen is losing her powers. But we're ultimately following this young, starts out as a young girl named Delena, as her village is consumed by spirits, and then she finds out that she has some affinity to control the spirits, and so she goes to the magical school in this kingdom to train to potentially become an heir to the throne and control the spirits. And so it starts out with her as a child, and then she's a teenager at the magical school, and then ultimately she ends up as an adult. I believe she's like 19 or 20 at the end of the story. So this is kind of a good bridge book between young adult and adult. We're also following a Vin, who's a disgraced champion of the queen. He and the queen were lovers and had a falling out, and he is like banished, but he kind of does like vigilante justice, and we kind of figure out what's going on with that as well. So we're kind of following two primary points of view. And like I said, I don't think there was anything particularly bad or particularly great about this story. It was just kind of like a fun listen to, but I'm not really gonna think about it after this video. And I don't, like, I gave it like a 3.5 out of 5 stars, and sometimes when I read a story, first book in a series, and it's 3.5, I will continue because I'm like, okay, this has potential to get really, really good. Or I'm like, nah, I think I'm good with this one story. And I do think this, the second book in this particular series follows a different main character. So it's more of like a spin-off continuation than a direct sequel. So this first book kind of reads as a standalone to me, and I'm content with that. I think I've gotten what I needed to out of the story. And it's not like to say that it's bad. I just thought it was okay. It was good, not great. Mr. Penumbra's 24-Hour Bookstore. I read this because I read Moonbound by Robin Sloan and really enjoyed it. So I decided to go back and read some of his earlier works. And this is a weird little book about this man, and his name is Clay. And he ends up working at this really strange bookstore that's like very skinny and tall, and it only sells a couple books at the front, and then the rest of the books are in the back, and up the walls are these books that have a strange purpose and act more like a library to some strange individuals than it is a bookstore. And so we're kind of unraveling the mystery of what's going on with this bookstore and Mr. Penumbra. And if there was such a genre or subgenre as light academia instead of dark academia, I would call this book light academia, because it gives off like secret societies, there's a mystery at play, things are weird, but we're trying to figure out what's going on. There's kind of like this weird vibe to it, but it's like goofy. This is, Robin Sloan writes these books that are just silly and weird and quirky in a fun way, not in a strange like horror way, in like a upbeat, kind of make you smile while you're reading it kind of way. And so I call this book light academia, because that's what it is. And I again gave this 4 stars. I gave Moonbound by the same author 4 stars for very similar reasons, because I thought the ending wasn't super satisfying, but the journey was so fun that I gave it 4 stars. I think if you like weird books, if you like short books, if you like books about books, if you like libraries, if you're obsessed with bookstores, and if you like secret societies, give this one a shot. Very quickly at the end of this video, I'm just talking about very quickly what I'm in the middle of. The Ippos King by Grace Draven. This is, again, continuing my Grace Draven obsession. This is the 3rd book in the Wraith Kings series. This is following a different couple who we have met in the previous 2 books, and we're following them as they are on a mission. So it's kind of a quest, adventure, travel, fantasy romance. And I'm like 65% of the way through this. I'm like almost getting almost done with it, and I'm really enjoying it. I give the other 2 books in this series 4.5 out of 5 stars, and I can't imagine giving this book less than 4 stars at this point. I like Grace Draven's fantasy, and I like her romance, and I like, in this particular series, I feel like the balance is there. As a fantasy lover and a romance lover, I think she does fantasy romance really, really well. And then the other book I'm reading is The Fury of the Gods by John Gwynne, and this is the 3rd book in the Bloodsworn saga, and kind of what kicked off my John Gwynne obsession was The Shadow of the Gods, and I'm concluding this trilogy, and I'm reading it slow because I like want to know what happens, but I'm scared of the end, which I think is exactly where John Gwynne wants me to be. He wants me to be nervous about the main characters because he's not afraid to hurt me, the reader, if you know what I mean. And I'm obsessed with this so far. I'm really liking it. It's a lot of setup for the final confrontation, but it's going to be a big confrontation, and so I'm just along for the ride, and I'm scared. I'm scared. Those are the 6 books I completed in the month of October, and the 2 I'm in the middle of that I'll hopefully finish by Halloween. But thank you so much for watching. What was your favorite read of October? I would love to know in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in another video of mine very soon. Bye.